During the original multi-species focus week, we learned a lot about the benefits that could come with multi-species swards, like increased dry matter production for a lot less nitrogen, drought tolerance and animal performance. In the last couple of years, there's been a lot of new research released about the performance of these swards compared to conventional grass and clover swards. So today we're at Johnstown Castle to see what has been going on the last couple of years and also what the future holds for multi-species swards.
Originally, a lot of the mixtures work, of course, was based in plant ecology and semi-natural grasslands, and the big transition was testing some of those ideas in agronomic grasslands, which we've been doing. I think some of the key changes have been starting work on grass clover has gone to 2 grasses and 2 clovers. And then we were starting to look at the introduction of herbs. So does the addition of herbs to the multi-species mixtures offer some sort of a marginal benefit to just having grasses and clovers? We've also seen a bunch of other measurements that will go beyond yield kicking in. So a good example would of course be the drought work, which would set up all the plots and look at the performance of mixtures and monocultures under rain-fed conditions, but also have this additional experimental drought treatments so that we can pinpoint what is the effect of drought as well. And we've seen a bunch of those other kinds of measurements appearing through many European projects, not just involving ourselves in Teagasc or Multi4More, but also many other European projects looking at nitrate leaching, greenhouse gas emissions, again testing species other than the ones that we would be normally used to, like perennial ryegrass and red and white clover. That would be some of the main changes that have happened over the years. Another big one, of course, would be the multi-site experiments that are starting to happen. That instead of looking at what happens at one particular experimental research farm or one single experiment, we're seeing a greater integration of results across multiple sites.
I was part of a plot trial looking at multi-species, 6 species mixtures. There was 2 aspects of my PhD, so it was split into 2 experiments. The first one was a plot experiment, looking at 3 sward types, perennial ryegrass, ryegrass white clover, and a 6 species multi-species mixture. And I was looking at rotation length, so 21 days versus 28 days, and post-cutting height, so 4 centimetres versus 6 centimetre residuals. And basically the results in terms of yield and botanical composition, we basically found that there was no difference in the yield of the different species under the different cutting managements. The quality was similar, the different cutting heights and the different rotation lengths. None of the sward types were really affected by cutting them at 4 centimetres versus 6 centimetres or 21 days versus 28 days, which is important not only for the multi-species, like in terms of managing them on a longer rotation length versus perennial ryegrass or ryegrass white clover, but it's also interesting from the perennial ryegrass side of things, like that extending the rotation length and increasing the residual height didn't have effect on quality or the yield. Which sward type? Could we look at perennial ryegrass white clover or the 6 species mixture? Because you can see from the research at UCD that there wasn't much difference between the perennial ryegrass white clover and the multi-species in terms of no significant difference between their kill-out dates. And also there's other trials on milk and dairy showing that there's no significant difference between the quality and quantity of milk being produced between the swards. But I think the main benefit of multi-species swards, and hopefully we'll be able to answer this with Multi4More in terms of the biodiversity aspect, the benefit that the multi-species swards have for biodiversity in terms of insects, below ground earthworm populations and actually long-term soil health. I think another question that's really important is, why is it the 6 species mixture that we're going with now? Do we need all of the 6 species in that mixture? Could we get the same benefit by excluding one, or could we replace one with a different species?
If we think about grass clover mixtures as the standard now, before we used to look at high nitrogen lowly perennial as the baseline, and now I think that's moved on and we have grass clover as the new baseline with a lower nitrogen. And one of our real questions is, well, is there a marginal benefit to having more species than just grass clover in the multi-species story? So the environmental additional measurements are probably key to unravelling that, and we do see strong benefits to reduce nitrate leaching, to improve soil health and soil biodiversity. We're seeing some recent research here which is showing how soil nematodes, which are a really good indicator of soil health and soil fertility, are much improved and very strongly related to the number of species in the multi-species sward, up to 6 species. We've been shown that soil nitrous oxide emissions are, their emissions intensity more so are lower under multi-species swards. And we're currently doing work which is looking at nitrate leaching on the farm and nitrous oxide emissions in the longer term. So we're going to continue to do that. One of the next research challenges for us is to get out onto this wider cohort of farmers, commercial farmers, who are implementing it, and maybe do better research that involves them. Thinking about the key questions that we'd like to see being resolved in the next 5 to 10 years. I think investigating the marginal gain in multi-species swards compared to grass clover only is critical to justify that jump and that change in management. The other thing, which I think we will see, and there's a lot of data already coming through and research studies completing in the next few years, is how does it fare in actual production systems as we go from plot scale work up to integrating it into farmlet and paddock scale studies. I think that's very important, and show, can we have lower nitrogen systems with equal animal welfare and the same or more milk production from the farm area. This is very important. And I think that the whole climate adaptation story is extremely important. Again, I think this is a differentiation point in multi-species compared to grass clover, is its climate resilience. And in the longer term, we've got a lot of research to do and a lot to catch up on to investigate what mix of species, how many of them, which particular species, will it be ryegrass in the future? I think these are big questions for us to think about as we prepare for a changing climate that, as bad as spring 2024 has been, you know, this is what's predicted to be the norm in another 20 or 30 years. Wetter springs, drier summers, and we are probably going to need a change in the kind of vegetation that we rely on in Irish agriculture to deal with that kind of a challenge.